things that go into it. One thing we found early on was that something can start off seeming really scary, but if it's so hard you got to keep doing it over and over again, it stops being scary.
Yeah.
If you keep having it.
Like losing and restarting, that just kills the horror element of it.
Why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us what your role at Knuckle and with Heliophobia is.
Okay, I'm Dave. I'm the co-founder of Knuckle Games. I'm the developer, artist, do a little bit of business stuff, but I'm mostly working on the game.
I'm Henry. I'm doing all the promotion and social media and audience engagement stuff for the game.
Cool. So why don't you give us the convention pitch for Heliophobia?
Right,
what is it? What's it all about? What's the deal?
Heliophobia is a first-person, nonlinear horror mystery. So we have scary horror levels broken up with puzzle-solving levels. And the story is told in a nonlinear fashion, so everyone's going to get their story played out a little differently.
Yeah. Cool. And that's one of the things I really wanted to kind of touch base on in this interview. Is this idea of a segmented story, a segmented narrative that's going to play out in a non-linear fashion. What made you decide to create Heliophobia in that way, and what are some of the strengths you found with that process, and what are some of the challenges you've run into?
That was one of the core concepts that I kind of had for this game as I was starting out. I knew I wanted to make a horror game. I knew I wanted to make it non-linear. So in that sense, we can't do certain things that other games do, or that pretty much all games do. Like, we can't have a difficulty curve, because if you're playing the game in any order, and then one level's super hard, one level's super easy, it kind of throws things off. So we have to kind of make things neutral throughout, and welcoming to new players, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's still challenging, but, like, you'll be able to get through it if you try. So that's one of the big hurdles that we had making the game. But other than that, I just wanted to tell the story in kind of a unique way. That seems really confusing at first, like you're kind of be lost in the dark. If you've seen movies like Memento or Mulholland Drive, those are big inspirations. You're kind of lost, and then as you get closer to the end, it kind of all comes together.
Cool. Yeah, when that was in the initial pitch for Heliophobia, it kind of was the hook in my mouth. I was like, oh, if we're going to get Lynchian up in here, I'm all about it. Tonally, this is a very different game than the other stuff that Glass Knuckles has done. I mean, we've got Thief Town, one of my favorite party games still, Defragmented. It's a very different, both mechanically and tonally. A lot of the games have not been in a first-person, well, any of the games have not been in a first-person perspective, and they've been more kind of towards a pixel side or a more nostalgic art style, as opposed to Heliophobia's pretty realistic style. So what was the impetus to change that style, to do things in a little bit of a different direction than you have been?
I think we're just kind of maturing over time. Like, we started out with some really basic pixel games because that's all we could do at the time. We did have higher aspirations, but we did still enjoy working on pixel games, working on simplistic things, but as we got more resources, as we got more talent, more experience, we wanted to move on, push the boundaries, try new things. So we're interested in basically spreading out, trying new things, exploring different genres.
Sure, makes sense.
We both, just in general, like horror.
Yeah, we're both big horror fans.
It made sense.
Well, that leads into my other question, which was kind of the one thing I really wanted to talk about, both because it's thematic for the month and it's very, central to Heliophobia, and that's horror. So, as a developer of a horror game, how do you approach that? What kind of thoughts are in your mind on building suspense and terror? What has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? What are some pitfalls you found that aren't going to work? I know that Heliophobia is still very early in development, but I thought it might be interesting to kind of get that perspective.
Want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it. One thing we found early on was that something can start off seeming really scary, but if it's so hard you got to keep doing it over and over again, it stops being scary.
Yeah.
If you keep having it.
Like losing and restarting, that just kills the horror element of it. So you need to keep that tension, keep that difficulty without basically pushing the player over the edge.
And that's also why we broke it up with, we have horror levels. It almost alternates a level that involves running and a level that just involves exploring where there's not as much danger, so that way the player gets a breather and then it gets the heart rate back up again. If it's just constant in your face, and I don't think any game really does that where they just keep hitting you with it. They always have to back off for at least a little while.
Yeah, it's also important to telling the story. Like, we need breaks in the horror so that we can fit in notes, story, all that sort of stuff, that the world building stuff, basically. We let the player explore levels, go around freely, and not have to worry about monsters at this one point in time, but we could throw them back in at any other point. Another core philosophy that I've been designing with is to not resort too much to cheap jump scares. I'm not really a fan of cheap jump scares in movies and games, so I try and give people fair warning, like things will get creepy, things will get, I guess, disturbing is kind of an over-the-top word, but things will bother you. You'll be on edge a lot, but we're not going to just pop out things all the time and try to get jumps.
Unless you get careless and don't realize that the monster's right behind you.
Yeah.
Because that can happen.
Yep.
If you don't pay attention, then every scare is a jump scare. Touched on some of the stuff with Heliophobia, and obviously this is a very, a game still in alpha, and, its nature kind of is mysterious, so we're not going to spoil anything. But I thought, kind of leading from talking about horror into your background, I thought one thing to touch on that might be good is, are there any horror games that you've played that you think really informed how you've gone about making Heliophobia? Either indie or AAA, either way.
Yeah, I have a lot of horror influences in games. Games that I played recently that I really liked were Inside and Soma. Both amazing games. I totally recommend them to everybody. The older fictional games like Amnesia are great as well. And of course, even the classics like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, everybody knows about those. One old game that I really did like a lot is Eternal Darkness. It's kind of a lesser played gem, I find, but I like what they did with the sanity meter and kind of just
Breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, keeping the player on edge at all times. I don't think we're going to be breaking the fourth wall, but they did have some unique concepts in there.
The big one for me, because I'm helping out with story a lot more so than development, was the first Fear game. That to me was so cool. It was a first-person shooter. It was an action first. But during those calm moments, like we were talking about, you would go on someone's computer, read an email, or listen to a voice message, and you'd learn about just a massive story that you weren't even experiencing. Mm-hmm. You had your main story that was, in my mind, almost less enticing than finding out the background, the backstory, all this cool stuff that you only found out if you walked around the office buildings and, searched.
Cool.
And that's kind of a lot of our stories told via notes and things you have to come across.
Very cool. So how did you guys get into indie development? We've mentioned, some of the other stuff you've worked on, Dave, but why don't you give us kind of the brief backstory of what brought you to be an indie game developer?
I've been kind of making games since, like, middle school or so, just crappy little calculator games, text games, browser games. In college, I met up with Brett, the creator of Thief Town, and we formed Glass Knuckle Games together. We started off working on browser games as Glass Knuckle. Eventually, I moved on to Noir Syndrome. He moved on to Thief Town. We released those within a year of each other. Those were moderately successful, I suppose, and that funded us as a company to make Defragmented, and now we're on to Heliophobia, basically.
I've known Dave since we were 10 years old. is really where the story starts. But I got involved around the time of PAX, just helping do customer engagement stuff for Defragmented, actually, when the game had already been released. And we had just been talking, and he brought me in to help out with Heliophobia. I think it helps to have somebody who doesn't make games for a living, who can come at it from the outside angle as a fan of video games and movies and TV shows, and not as someone who makes them and knows all the fine stuff like he does.
Cool. So, while we already kind of touched on some horror games that were influential to you, what other games have you been playing now? Just as a gamer, not necessarily as a developer, but what games have been eating up your game time?
Recently I've been playing a lot of Blizzard games. Overwatch is big. I know a lot of people are playing that right now, but I've been getting back into Diablo 3. I've always liked Diablo a lot. I've also been playing Hitman. Whenever there's a new episode comes out, I hop into those for a while, and I played Mirror's Edge recently, Inside. Other than those, I think not too much. I'm looking forward to Dishonored 2 in November. That's going to be the big one of the year for me.
I've also been playing Hitman. I'm plugging away at Mirror's Edge, but it's starting to frustrate me. and I fell back into Destiny. I think Destiny really righted all of its wrongs over the past year and has become the game it was supposed to be. I'm looking forward to Gears of War 4. That's going to make me feel like a high schooler again. Because there's still a perverse joy I get out of chainsawing the monsters or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. A certain high school nostalgia. I get that.
Exactly. The way the controller rumbles when you get the chainsaw guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of bring things to a close, we always like to ask developers if there are some other indie teams working on projects that they think are particularly noteworthy or people might not have heard of that they think are doing something cool. So, are there any indie teams out there that you think are doing something really cool?
Well,
Bacon Man.
Yeah,
our boys Bacon Man.
The obvious shout out that Glass Knuckle has to give is Bacon Man. Whenever we have conventions together, we get into fake Twitter feuds. Some people get it, some people don't. They think we're fighting. It's all in good fun. So we love the Bacon Man team. They're great guys, and one girl I think as well. And also Mark Mayers from Desolus. I know you've interviewed both of these people already.
Yeah,
so
that's good though. I can
that we're shouting them out.
direct people to our previous Indiedev interviews.
Yeah.
So
Go check out those interviews. They're probably good as well. But yeah, those were the two big ones that I was going to mention. Like, those are the people that we see at most of the conventions, and those are the people that you should go check out. Neither of those games are complete right now, so hop on while they're still working on them.
Yeah.
Because we hacked them and destroyed Bacon Man, they had to start over.
Yeah. Deleted Bacon Man.
Just delete it straight. Any other ones, Henry, or?
I'm not as up on the indie scene as I should be, unfortunately.
You played Inside, right?
I did. Yeah, Inside was what a trip. Did you play it?
I did. It was very good. A short experience, but a really, really, really well polished one.
So I got home. I was like, it was like 1 a.m. Already. I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and like play for like an hour. I played the whole thing. I couldn't put it down, and that's what people toss around. I couldn't put it down, but I really couldn't. I had to finish it that night, otherwise I wouldn't have slept.
Right.
So I love that.
I had the exact same experience
when
I played through that game, so I totally get it. Cool. Well, Dave and Henry from Glass Knuckle Games, thanks for telling us a little bit about the process behind Heliophobia. We'll be eagerly looking forward to all the mysteries coming as development continues, and for giving a little background on where you're coming from and what your influences are.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for talking to us.
Everyone check us out on social media, at Glass Knuckle Games. We got Facebook, join our newsletter, because we very soon have to, maybe before this interview gets edited and sent out, we have some spooky stuff coming your way.
Ooh, spooky stuff for the month of October. All right, thank you so much, guys.
It's October. We got to do something.
It's the month for horror games.